Mention the words Les Paul, and the majority of people will immediately think of the Les Paul guitar, one of the most famous and best-selling guitars over the past 50 years. But Les Paul is not just a noun. He was a curious boy that came from humble beginnings, who then became an ingenious man, inventor, innovator, and one heck of a guitar player. Les Paul was a leader who changed the course of music history in all genres, and his legacy lives on each and every time an electric guitar is played, a song is recorded, or music is heard. He led a long and varied life, so won't you please join me on this journey of the road less traveled. Les Paul was born Lester William Pulsfuss in Waukesha, Wisconsin on June 9, 1915. He was from a German background. His dad's name was August and his mother's name was Evelyn. They divorced when he was still young, and his mother raised him and his older brother Ralph on her own. This is the house they grew up in. He was known throughout his life by several different nicknames, such as the Wizard of Waukesha, Red Hot Red, and Rhubarb Red. Les was a very curious boy, and he would experiment on sounds, how they were made, what changed the sounds, and how he could make different sounds. When he was just 10 years old, he made a harmonica holder from a coat hanger, and he also made his own amplified guitar. He first started loving music when he was 8 years old. He saw a ditch digger playing a harmonica outside of his house and was mesmerized by it. The ditch digger gave him his harmonica and told him he should learn how to play and never give up. In order to keep it, his mother had to boil it to get rid of the germs. By doing so, it gave the harmonica a more bluesy, bubbly tone that made Les sound different to the other harmonica players. In 1927, when Les was just 12 years old, he got his first guitar from Sears and it cost just $3.98. Although Les was very talented, he couldn't read music, but he had an ear for sound. In fact, when Les first started to learn music, his teacher told his mother that he would have no future in music at all. He played in local clubs in Chicago, and in 1935 he took on the name Les Paul and played jazz music. Les loved being on stage and really enjoyed interacting with his audience. Here he is on stage in Chicago. In 1938, Les moved to New York and formed the Les Paul Trio, which is where he got his nationwide exposure on the Fred Waring's Pennsylvanians radio show, the biggest band and radio personalities of the day. Les loved to tinker. One of his experiments led to one of his most famous inventions, the log. When he was just 12, he took a piece of iron railroad track and attached a guitar string to it and realized he could sustain the sound. This gave him the idea that when he was in New York, he should make a solid body guitar. So Les took a 4x4 piece of pine wood and put 2 homemade pickups on it, strings, and a neck, and created a solid body electric guitar. Although it sounded great, it looked weird and people didn't take much notice of it. Les cut his acoustic guitar in half and attached it to either side of the log to make it look more recognizable. He brought his idea to Gibson, and although they didn't use this design, they worked with Les in creating the Les Paul electric guitar. Les moved to Hollywood in 1943 after a long recovery from nearly electrocuting himself in New York. While in Hollywood, Les worked with Bing Crosby in recording his first hit. One night, Bing called him to ask if he would record the next day at 8. Les said of course, and then asked him, 8 p.m.? Crosby said no, 8 a.m. Les was shocked. No one ever recorded that early. Crosby said that's when his voice was best, so of course Les went there without any hesitation. In 1945, Les met Iris Colleen Summers, soon to be known as Mary Ford, and they started working together in 1948. One night in 48, on the way home from Wisconsin to California, Mary and Paul were in a near-fatal car accident. She was driving on Route 66 and the road was icy, and the car plunged off the side of the railroad overpass, dropping over 20 feet into a ravine. Les had shattered his right arm and was told they could not rebuild his elbow and that they might have to amputate. He flew to Los Angeles and they set his arm about 90-degree angle so he could continue playing the guitar, and it took him over a year and a half to recover. But Mary stuck by him and they were married in 1949. Les said that Mary Ford was the voice of his melodies and the love of his life. He was quoted as saying, "Mary has more talent than any person I've ever seen in my lifetime. Now there was a gal who was gifted." Together they recorded 28 hits during the years between 1950 and 1957. Some of their hits included How High the Moon, Vaya Con Dios, and The Tennessee Waltz. They even hosted their own TV show called The Les Paul and Mary Ford Show. Another great invention of Les Paul's was the multi-track recording device. This invention entirely changed the way music would be recorded for future generations. Musicians were now able to layer many tracks over each other by giving the recording a variety of sounds. This led Les to making the pulverizer, a personal and advanced looping device that attached to his guitar that he was able to control the layers with. Here I am holding the actual guitar with the pulverizer attached. He also worked closely with Capitol Records and invented reverb chambers. Here's what Professor Seth Clute of Ramapo College has to say about it.
It's less well known for, but that are absolutely pervasive throughout all of music history. The major thing is the development of the reverb chambers at Capitol Records, and the sound of those reverb chambers can be heard on records by Frank Sinatra and Madonna and the Beatles and the Beach Boys. I mean, it's the entire history of music.
These are basically large echo rooms that were built in the basement made of concrete. The musicians would sing in the recording studio on the 15th floor, and the recording would be sent down to the chamber through wires, recorded again, then sent back up to the studio where the sound was transformed. Some of the most famous guitarists of today worship Les Paul on his guitars. Jimmy Page from the band Led Zeppelin is probably one of the most famous guitar players of all time who is rarely seen playing anything else but a Les Paul guitar. Paul McCartney was quoted as saying, "For me, it's just beautiful play. It's a classic and one of those I have is 50 years old, so it's kind of a great antique as well as being a classic." Another famous guitar player is Eric Clapton, who just had to have the Les Paul Gold Top when he first got started. More current guitarists who praise Les Paul are Slash, who quoted saying, "Les Paul literally wiped the stage clean with me first time I played with him," and Zakk Wylde, who said, "It's amazing, you know. Recording is because of Les Paul. He invented multi-track recording. Even if it's rap musicians who don't play guitar, Les Paul is there. Anywhere from rap to country, heavy metal, rock to jazz. Anything that uses multi-track recording owes a debt to Les Paul." Even in his later years, Les Paul stayed active. He performed at the Iridium Jazz Club in New York City every Monday night with the Les Paul Trio. He was a recipient of many awards, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and the National Medal of Arts presented by George Bush. He was even inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, to which they said, "It's safe to say that rock and roll as we know it would not exist without his invention." Finally, he was also inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2005. They were quoted as saying, "The quality and originality of Les Paul's work inspired a generation of musicians to embrace his guitar and recording techniques. It is even said that at the end of his life he was working on the improvement of hearing aids." Les Paul passed away on August 19th of 2009 at the age of 94. He's buried in his hometown. Les Paul was definitely a leader who changed the course of music history in all genres, and it's clear that his legacy lives on each and every time an electric guitar is played, a song is recorded, or music is heard. Les Paul should always be remembered. His good friend Jim Masaki has dedicated his life to ensuring his legacy lives on.
Knowing him for 30 years, 29 years, going to his house as much as I did, I never saw him sit still. He was never on a couch watching TV. He was always doing something.
He met Les in the 80s and became his best friend and was with him when he passed away in 2009. Jim wrote the eulogy for Les Paul's funeral, and in it he said, "I think it's fair to say Les has given us, as well as the world, anything and everything we could ever need. Les gave everyone the tools to succeed, and he set a standard for all of us to follow. Les was a teacher, and we were his students." Ask anyone who knows anything about music and sound engineering, and they will all say the same thing. Les Paul is a trailblazer, and because of him and his inventions, the world of music is what it is today. Jim Axelrod of ABC Sunday Morning summed it up quite well when he said, "Les Paul tinkered in his basement and ended up rocking the world." True that, Jim. True that.